harrowing story of Harold Oldrey, born into the Catholic Sons of Men order of monster slayers, dating back to the Crusades. He was a third-generation paladin, following his father and grandfather of the fraternal order dating back to Charlemagne. Their work was the hunting of supernatural threats to mankind, including vampires, various different types of werewolves, demons from the pit of hell, and the many other unnatural horrors that haunted and plagued humanity. After being sent to Africa to train more paladins, only to see them essentially sacrificed against the most powerful adversaries, Harold became disillusioned with the order, a fact that led the leadership to send him woefully unprepared against a new threat, reanimated, semi-mechanical monstrosities. The ensuing fallout led to Harold losing the paladin's power and turning to more traditional means of hunting. However, the church's treatment of women accused of witchcraft proved a final straw, leading Harold to partner with a Celtic druid as the two marched against an army of demonic cultists, gathered together on the mythical Blackalla Island, where the devil is said to hold court on Earth. Their adventure inspired elements of the silent movie action. The final entry in Harold's journals indicates the return of a demonic vampire demigod. It appears his life was lost in stopping this evil, but his son Harold Jr. would carry on his name and work.
Have you ever heard of the Burned Woman? A horrifying undead witch, returned to life by her dark lord, in the form of a blackened, charred corpse, though she has also been described quite differently. In the mid-19th century, she left a string of terror across Europe, inciting non-human hauntings, demonic possessions, and ancient diabolical curses, as well as summoning physical demonic creatures. According to the detailed accounts in the journals of my ancestor, the monster slayer Harold Oldrey, she was a monstrous entity they called Haxan, a witch who'd sold her soul and was burned at the stake for it, returned to life by her dark lord, with new demonic powers. Something I get asked a lot is why my ancestor Harold Oldrey left the Sons of Man order. For any of you unfamiliar, the Sons of Man was a holy order of Catholic exorcists and supposed monster hunters dating back to the Crusades, born of two unique brotherhoods. And while they maintained contemporary military forces, they also relied heavily on paladins, holy warriors dating back to Charlemagne. Harold's issues with the leadership of that order began when he was sent to missionaries in Africa, where he was given the sacred duty to find and train new paladins like himself. And while this went incredibly successfully, producing some of his best apprentices ever, when finished they were uniquely used against the deadliest adversaries, essentially as cannon fodder, causing Harold to swear to never train another paladin again. The leadership soon sent him woefully unprepared against man-made creatures, causing the death of several children and other paladins. Harold was never able to activate the power again. The final straw came in the continued persecution of women accused of witchcraft, leading to Harold breaking a druid witch out from church imprisonment, and the two of them venturing together to stop the devil on Blackalla Island. Soon after, he left and worked on his own.
My ancestor Harold Oldrey's final paladin apprentice was his most trusted confidant, an African man hailing from what is modern Niger, at a time when paladins from the African continent were becoming increasingly common, a first for the centuries-old order, which dated back to Charlemagne. When the Sons of Man missionaries arrived in Africa, they immediately noticed the population's propensity for spiritual strength, a virtue central to the order of paladins. An older boy watched as Harold, alone with his sword, slew the Sasabansum, monstrous creatures terrorizing the tribe. The boy, and many others, soon enlisted for training. He gained a reputation for being the best, and took the name Samuel, after the biblical prophet, and surname Ravenson, for the birds that seemed to watch over him. According to Harold's writings, what happened next was the beginning of his falling out with the Sons of Man. As soon as they were trained, the Order's leadership used the African paladins uniquely against the most dangerous targets. A year later, more than half of them were dead. Because of this, Harold swore an oath to never train another paladin again. He would march none more to their memorials. Despite this, Harold wrote that Samuel and his own apprentice were the only ones to aid he and Bridget in their march on Bluculla Island to stop the devil and his servants. Primevals, Harold Oldrey, and the Sons of Man's last siege, an event heavily documented in Harold's journals, where he writes of the primeval vampire Morden, one of the last purebloods of his kind. The original vampires, primevals, were infected proto-humans, possibly the ogre species I've shown before. Human victims would take a smaller, relatively less monstrous form. Morden and his breed took refuge amongst the harshest Carpathian mountains for centuries. But the second fall of Dimitri Vadeska ripped a hole in the psychic hierarchy of the vampire species, leading Morden to push his breed outward in a primordial-powered grab, where they terrorized and wiped out whole villages. The Sons of Men came to answer this threat, their greatest in decades. But the leadership had become split on the use of things like secret weapon Raphael Caron, opting instead for more traditional means of combat. This responsibility was dumped onto the already disenfranchised Harold, who with full authority rallied the Order's remaining military. What was left of the paladins and high exorcists, as well as his many engineer contacts and other renowned hunters, all to march through the mountains in a siege on Morden's stronghold cliff. And while the mission proved ultimately to be a success, the Sons of Man would never recover from its heavy losses, and the fight for a vampire alpha presses ever on. Several of you have wondered about who my ancestor, Harold Oldrey, ended up partnering with to continue the family. The journals I have never specify, but give me possible ideas. The first, perhaps unsurprisingly, is the witch Bridget I have spoken of at length, a druid avatar of a Celtic goddess. The next, Sister Helena, is both most controversial and likely thanks to a family rumor. They met on one of his missions, and she quickly petitioned to serve as his secretary, and was actually the one to push him to chronicling his life, and who collected his belongings into our family heirloom trunk. The last, who I've not yet mentioned, was a woman named Nadia Sokolov. According to his writings, she was a Slavic vampire hunter that also had characteristics of a shaman. Based on the description, I believe she was a Kursnik, a mythic type of hunter associated with animal spirits that fits into the larger vampire hunter tradition in Europe, which still extends out of history to people that live to this day. Among the various historical vampire hunting traditions throughout Europe, perhaps one of the most interesting comes from Slavic folklore. The Kursnik, supposedly hailing from Eastern Europe, primarily hunted a type of vampire called Kudluk. My ancestor was briefly romantically involved with a woman who fit the description perfectly. He wrote that she was a hunter who specialized in vampires, but displayed various supernatural abilities. The Kursnik were said to possess shamanic powers, taught to them by Slavic, nymph-like fairies called Vila, including gifts like connection to animal spirits. In hunting the Kudluk, it is said the two would meet in animal form. The Kursnik in the form of a white wolf, the Kudluk a deep black one, given that these stories were not written down until after Christianity came to the region. Some believe their origins lie in other pagan European traditions, others still that it dates back to ancient Babylon.
In the 1860s, my ancestor Harold Oldrey left the Sons of Man order due to growing disagreements with them. He went on to become something like a Victorian-era Nick Fury, taking supernatural threats as his own personal responsibility, and building a better network to face them. Through his connection with the druid Bridget, he built relationships with other witches, who aided in interactions with Fae and other beings. He also gathered needed soldiers and mercenaries to the cause, arming them with cutting-edge weaponry developed by the most genius engineering minds in Europe, pushing beyond what many believed possible. His storied reputation also attracted many hunters with different specialties to join in his cause, and even some of his old paladin allies, who were increasingly independent of the greater Sons of Man as well. He found non-Sons of Man exorcists, and even reached out to hunters beyond Europe.
Harold Oldrey, third-generation soldier in the Sons of Men order, born into mankind's secret war against the many creatures of the night, wielding his family's tools, His personal journals and the writings of his descendants tell of the myriad horrors they stood against. I think it's best we begin with the burned woman. You can read the full story now.